Hi, everyone, and welcome to a new NYLI Skills Series webinar. My name is Alyssa Valenti-Kroski, and I am the Director of Innovation and Engagement here at the New York Law Institute. And today I'll be talking to you about personal digital archiving. So welcome, and let's get going. Today, more and more of our lives are becoming digital. Everything from family photographs, music files, video footage, and correspondence to medical records, bookmarks, documents, and even ideas are now available in electronic form. This makes access quick and convenient, but how do we save all of these digital assets for the long term? Most of us have experienced personal data loss at one time or another, due to hard drive failure, file corruption, technology obsolescence, or even accidental file deletion. So what should we be doing right now to safeguard our digital creations? Today's session will explain the process of creating and executing an action plan for archiving personal digital assets, deciding what to store, consolidating multiple file versions, and cataloging resources. We'll explore both local storage media and cloud services, as well as institutional and disciplinary repositories. You'll learn to plan and execute the archiving of your own personal digital assets, as well as how to teach your patrons how to do this for themselves. And there are a lot of different digital asset types, everything from photos and image files to emails, to presentations, to even software applications that you want to save. First, let's talk about some of the challenges and obstacles that are involved with saving digital assets. The first is technology obsolescence or failure. And this is when you archive or store your files on a media type that is now obsolescent. Floppy disks, for example, or even CD and DVD ROMs. Nowadays, most laptops don't come with a CD or DVD tray for you to even access these files anymore. They might be stored on old platforms that no longer work or are incompatible with the file type that you've saved your assets in. Or they might be stored on a local hard drive that has failed. Stockpiling is another challenge, and this is when you move files wholesale from one computer to another, transferring your entire My Documents folder to a new machine, for example, or emailing yourself everything. With stockpiling, there's no judgment involved about what files are more important than others and worth saving versus the files that are just going to create a lot of clutter. Creating clones. This is when you save multiple versions of the same file and you're never really sure which one is the actual final version that you want to save. All files are definitely not created equal. For example, with image files that you have on your digital camera or even on your phone, once you upload these high resolution files to social media applications like Facebook, it really lowers the resolution and you aren't saving a high resolution archival master of that file. Distribution is another challenge, and this is when your files are just spread all over the place on multiple devices. Maybe you have some on a flash drive, some are on your laptop, others are on your mobile phone, some may be in the cloud or on CDs or disk drives. Or maybe they're hosted on various social networks, or as I mentioned, cloud storage services like Dropbox. And I want to take a moment to just mention that there is a difference between creating a backup of your files on your computer that you're currently using and creating an archive, a personal digital archive. So copying the contents of an entire hard drive is not the same thing as creating an archive where you go in and you judge what files you're going to want to save for the long term, what's important to you, and you curate this archive. And in this way, your files are easily discoverable by browsing through them versus browsing through a huge accumulation of a giant backup that you might have done for years. And I do have a strategy for creating a personal digital archive, and it is a 5-step plan. The first step in that plan is developing a strategy. This is when you create a selection criteria of what you're going to be saving to your digital archive. You look into different storage options and choose what options you're going to go with. You look at saving warm versus cold assets, and I'll go into this in a minute, and you choose what file formats you're going to be saving everything in. So to go into a little bit more detail, part of developing a strategy is developing a selection criteria. And you can decide on a case-by-case basis as you create new digital objects, which ones you want to save, which files you've downloaded that you want to save, or maybe acquired from someone else. You can also just make an overall determination based on the file format or the file type, for example, that you want to save all image files that you come across or that you create. Or you can make your selection criteria based on a field of study or a subject area. So for example, you want to save all of your email correspondence having to do with library science. And I do have some handouts for today's webinar, and one of them is a selection strategy worksheet, which you can go in and decide on your selection criteria. And there is no one-size-fits-all solution because everyone's personal digital archive is going to be a little bit different. Everyone is going to have a different set of criteria that is most important to them. Some people might want to save image files. Some people might want to save music files. For others, documents or email correspondence might be more important. Taking a look at different storage options, there are external hard drives which are available. Sometimes they are called external hard disk drives. There are also internal hard disk drives, but I recommend the external ones that you can just plug right into a port on your computer and save everything. They are relatively inexpensive. You can get 2 to 5 terabytes for around $100. And if you're not sure about what a terabyte is, to give you an example, 1,000 megabytes or MBs, which I'm sure you've seen when you've created different documents and smaller files. 1,000 of these equals 1 gigabyte, and 1,000 gigabytes equal 1 terabyte. So that is an awful lot of storage. There are also cloud storage options that are available for free. The main ones are Google Drive, OneDrive, Microsoft OneDrive, and Dropbox. And beyond the free versions, if you have a lot of files, as I do, you can also up these amounts through paid memberships. And then there are also repositories that are available. So these are databases or repositories containing the intellectual output of either an institution like university or a discipline. And there is an LIS or library science disciplinary repository that you might choose to put your articles in or other documents. But these would be publicly available in that LIS repository. And that brings me to the next point, which is there are different types of archives, and they include light, dark, and dim archives. And the light archives are the ones that when you put something in, it's going to be available to the public. So you might want to only save preprints of your articles, for example, in something that is publicly available. There are also dark archives which are not public, and usually these are backups of light or dim archives, but that is important to know about. And the dim archives are hybrids, so some stuff is available publicly and some is not. So you'll want to look into that before you put anything up on an archive, either institutional or disciplinary. And the rule of threes with regard to preservation and archiving is that a best practice is to save your archival collection in 3 places, preferably 3 geographically separate places. So not all in your desk drawer, for example. Maybe one is in the cloud, one is on a an external hard disk drive and one is backed up on your laptop. And I mentioned earlier warm versus cold assets as an idea. And the idea behind this is that if you start saving all of your digital assets while they're still relevant to you, so right away while they're warm, you will have a better value judgment of whether or not to save that digital asset. Once time goes by and you start to forget what's in the file or whether or not it's important to you, it's much more difficult to decide whether or not to put something in a digital archive. Some different file formats to consider. One type of file format is compressed versus a raw file type. And this mostly has to do with media objects like images that you can save in the raw, larger, high resolution format of a TIFF, for example, versus a compressed format, which takes up less space in a JPEG format. So that's something that you'll want to consider as well when deciding on what to save and how to save it. Do you want to save it in proprietary file formats versus open access formats? So do you want to save all of your documents in a .doc, for example, which will be accessible through Microsoft Word? Or do you want to save them in an open office format, for example, or an ODT format? So think about what kinds of software you're going to have access to throughout the years, because you don't want to lock yourself out of your own digital assets. And normalization in archiving is the practice of converting and storing all of your files of the same file type, so images, for example, in the same file format. So making a decision and going with it in a uniform manner throughout your archive. Some guidelines for what file types to choose. A good idea is to save in the most widely adopted format that's available. A format that also has a history of backward compatibility so that when new versions of the software become available, you can still access those old files. File formats with good metadata support, and we'll talk about adding metadata to files in a minute. And you might want to check out the Pronom database. This is a resource for anyone requiring impartial and definitive information about the file formats, software products, and other technical components required to support long-term access to electronic records and other digital objects of cultural, historical, or business value. Okay, so that is the strategy step. The next step to the plan is to develop a policy and create and design your workflow for how you're going to save all of these assets to your archive. And again, I'm going to have a couple of handouts to go along with today's webinar. And one is a worksheet for creating your personal policy. So this is really going to be based on what you decided in your strategy phase that you're going to save. This will help you design your workflow and guide you to how to deal with each type of digital asset that you either create yourself or download. So for example, here's an example of part of my archival policy. I'm a music lover and I have quite a large collection of MP3 files. It's very important to me that this collection remains accessible to me over the long term. So I have a personal policy for dealing with these files each time I download, purchase, or acquire new music. First, I now only collect DRM-free music files, as I have had the experience of being locked out of music that I had paid for. Second, each time I download new music, I save it to an all music archive, organized by artist, and then my album folders on my laptop. And I save it to an all music archive on my external hard drive, and then I load it onto my phone. I do all of this before I even start using or listening to the files. The next step in the 5-step plan is implementation. And this is the action part of the plan where you start to organize your archive. You develop a folder structure, decide on naming conventions for your files, and you add some metadata or tags. As far as folder structure, I've got some recommendations for different file types. For music files, I organize mine by artist. I create a folder for each artist, and then I create album folders within that artist folder, and then I save according to the song. So the path to one of my music files might be within a music folder. I would have a folder for Blondie for the artist, a folder for Parallel Lines for the album, and then heartofglass.mp3 would be the name of the song. For images, I organize mine by dates and events. So I've got an images folder. I will have another folder within that 2008 8/21 Italy trip, and then another folder within that titled Rome, and then the image would be named Coliseum.jpg or something similar. And for documents, I organize these by project or type of document. So within my documents folder, I have a budgets folder. I have a household_budget.xls file. I also have within my documents a next gen presentation folder. And then within that, I've got a lot of images, notes, and then I also have a nextgen.powerpoint file. Naming conventions involves naming files and folders in a consistent manner so that all of your files are named in a particular way, and it keeps everything very neat and consistent. Some people prefer a delimiter separated file format. I'm one of them. So I save my files with an underscore in between each word. So for example, 2010_resume.doc is one of the files in my archive. Some people prefer the dash. So you could name a document cookbook-recipes.doc and choose to name your files in that way. Some people prefer camel case. And this is where you will capitalize every letter in every word within your file name. So cover letters, the C and the L are both capitalized. Roman Coliseum, both the R and the C are capitalized. So it's really up to you what you prefer. I think that for neatness and uniformity in an archive, it's just a matter of choosing one and sticking with it. And then you may want to add some metadata and tags to your files. And there are certain applications that will let you do this quite easily. Adobe Photoshop and Adobe Lightroom will let you add a lot of metadata to your images. And all of the Microsoft Office products will allow you to add metadata within the document's properties. So under File, if you go to Properties, you can add all sorts of information about each file. So why would you want to do this? Well, it makes them much more discoverable and easily searchable, and it also lets you keep track of the provenance of every file. The 4th step in the plan is to create a digital archive catalog, and this is where you design a record of everything that you have saved so that you know where it is and what you've saved. So this is a complete list of all of your digital assets in your personal digital archive. It will also include the location information for your assets, any passwords or encryption keys for your protected files, usernames and passwords for cloud accounts, and optional additional metadata about your digital assets. So some examples of digital archives that I've created. One is a Google Doc, and this is, and you can check out this format if it's something that you like. You can simply copy what I've done here in a Google Doc. And I've created a spreadsheet with the digital asset, the file name, the path, my 3 locations, any passwords or notes. I've also created a database, an archival database within Zoho Creator, which lets you create one database for free for your account. And if you like this one, I've linked to it and I've made it public so that you can absolutely copy this database to create your own. But it is a very easy application for creating databases. All you do is drag and drop the different fields into the interface, and it literally walks you through how to create it. The final step of the plan is the maintenance part, and this is where you just make sure that you can continue to access your digital archive and all of your assets going forward. The first thing to keep in mind is migration awareness, and this is where you periodically change or upgrade your physical storage media, because it's not going to last forever, right? Maybe after 5 years or so, if you've got an external hard disk drive, you may want to transport your archive to a new one. Regularly check on cloud storage providers. While I don't think Microsoft is going anywhere, you may want to check on Dropbox and check on the news about your cloud storage providers. Make sure that they're not going to be closing up shop anytime soon. And periodically migrate your file formats to more updated versions of documents or files. Make sure that you can still access them. And a well-maintained archive will let you rediscover items that you forgot that you ever had and you wouldn't think to search for. An experience like rummaging through an old cardboard box filled with items and memories from your past. Some further resources that you can check out, and I'm going to be making this presentation on Canva publicly available, so you can just access that and click right into these further resources if you'd like. Thank you very much for joining me today. I'm Alyssa Valenti-Kroski, and this was a NYLI Skills Series webinar.